Saddam Hussein is saying, nope, I'm not repaying your debts. In fact, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say that you guys are overproducing oil for OPEC and arbitrarily and artificially driving oil prices down. And so they're having conflict between those two countries, and Saddam Hussein is effectively just trying to get out of paying debt. And he's going into kind of having this conversation about, okay, well, if you don't reduce your oil production, then we're going to take military action against you. But if you just pay us $10 billion, then we won't take this military action against you. Kuwait comes back and says, hey, we'll pay you $500 million. We're not going to pay any B's, but we'll pay some M's. And Saddam doesn't appreciate that. And on the 2nd of August, he invades Kuwait. And so he drives across the line, puts about 30,000 troops across into Kuwait, and they march and set up a puppet government. It takes them like 2 days, 3 days, to pretty much own Kuwait at that point. Yep. And so as kind of that is, and then what I also kind of learned was the fact that Saddam, in the back of his mind, this wasn't always about oil, but he wanted the Ottoman Empire back, which Kuwait was part of Iraq during that Ottoman Empire, and he wanted to expand his own influence. So he used a little bit of sleight of hand to just try to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and renege on what the British kind of drew up after the Ottoman Empire fell, and I'm going to try to take this back little by little. Obviously, George Bush 1 doesn't love that, gets a NATO coalition, and we start kind of deploying just like you're talking about. And we put jets and troops into Bahrain, and we put them into Saudi Arabia. We build up that coalition, which little known is something that I found interesting is Afghanistan fought on our side. Afghanistan was part of that coalition. And now it's like 593,000 American troops, 270,000 NATO and coalition troops. And here we are. So now we got, what is it? Captain Curly Pence shows up in theater, and leading up to theater, when you guys would go out and train, would you consider like, hey, we're going to fly an Iraq scenario today? Did you guys ever do that, or was it mostly Russian all the way through your career up to this point?
It had always been for what that unit had trained for at that part of the court world. So PACAF, we always trained for North Korea. And even after they invaded on the 2nd, the squadron, I still flew there for 4 more weeks. And we never said, back in the weapons shop, hey, let's get a map and put it up of Kuwait, and let's start putting where these SAM systems are, both in Iraq and Kuwait. Let's make a map and see what intel can get and build for us. When I got to Germany, and I was there for 2 months, and I was over in the 480th, and that's a whole different story. But when we deployed, the jets with the red tails on them became yellow tails, and we all became, because they had made it 24 UE. They took the 12 from the 480th and the 12 from the 81st, and then we were all yellow tails down in the desert. But even back in Germany, knowing that some other guys were going to have to go down to the theater, and eventually it was all the F-4Gs. The remaining squadron, 23rd, went to Turkey for the war. But nobody was wandering around going, okay, we're going to fly tactics for that. We just kept training for what we had always done there with that. We kind of put out some 2s and 3s in different places, but nothing, hey, this is all based on the new AOR Korea or Iraq.
Okay. And then leading up, and then once you get kind of into theaters, obviously when you guys don't necessarily train to that country, when you showed up and then were deploying into the conflict, what had intel told you guys about the threat? Like, what was your perception of the Iraqi MEZ, if you will, missile engagement zone, like going into theater? Like, just from a Weasel perspective, what did you guys expect?
We expected them to fight pretty hard. Like, as I said in the early beginning, they had 2s, 3s, 6s, and 8s, and they had a strong quantity of those, along with radar-guided AAA. So as you realized, hey, we're getting ready to go down there, you started really studying those 4 primary, along with the 57 millimeter and the Zeus 23. those would be your primary 6, and then maybe a height finder and some other locating radars. But that became your real portfolio of what to study. And you already knew them. You knew them from the Wild Weasel training course. You knew them from what you always go back in the vault and study. But now you're more interested is, where is this thing sitting on planet Earth in this AOR? And they were good. They had a lot of manpower at their fingertip. A lot of it they got out of the prisons. And so they would even move an SA-2 in hours, where you used to think that an SA-2 was going to be there in semi-permanent. Well, now it was semi-mobile. And yeah, it took them a few hours to break it down and move it. But if they knew they needed to move, they were on the prowl to maybe get up and go. At the beginning of the conflict, they were semi-permanent, but then they learned the hard way that when we found them, it wasn't going to last.
Were they kind of, this is kind of jumping now post-war, like your looking back assessment, do you think, did they operate in the same manner as the Vietnamese kind of operate there, like Russian trained? Did you feel that they were Russian trained, or did you feel like they bought them and then they just kind of operated them in a different manner in which you had trained to in the past or leading up to the conflict?
I think they had some Russian training. And in my job that I just finished from about 6 or 7 years ago, I had the most unique experience that for a full 3 days, and then later I picked up some more work, and for another 3 days, I flew with a gentleman, same age as me. He'd graduated from the USSR Air Academy, went through pilot training in the USSR in 1983, graduated in 84, and then flew MiG-21s, was an instructor in MiG-21s, and then his next assignment after those 2 MiG-21 assignments was to go to Iraq at Saddam's hometown at their Air Academy and be an instructor, teaching the young cadets at their Air Academy how to fly. And so when we talked about the flying in Iraq, they had AAA pits that fired at anything. And so he would take a student out, and I told him about this one AAA pit that I had seen firing during the conflict, and had marked the location because the guy was always firing and nobody would bomb him. And he said, that thing shot at me all the time when I had a student on a low-level training flight. So it was the wildest thing. So, hearing stories about how they trained in the MiG-21 in the Soviet country, then how they employed it. And looking back, they employed the SA-2s, very similar to it. I got to go into Kuwait to recapture some of their stuff and bring it back for us in late March of 1981, and went to an SA-2 radar site and went to a 57 millimeter big gun emplacement